Hey everybody, welcome back to Grumpy Acres. Well, after months of searching, we finally found the drone. Angela had been using it for real estate and it got packed away and we never could find it. And since we got it and it's up and running, we figured that we would do a video on a pond update. It'd been months since we did the first pond rehab video. Guy was done in like a day and a half, but doing a video about a hole in the ground with no water in it just did not seem very interesting. Well, as you can see, the amount of rain that we've had recently, the pond is completely filled up. It's almost at capacity. It's not high enough to get over the spillway, but it's pretty darn close. If you look at the top of the video right now, you can see where the grass changes color. That's where he cut in the new part of the pond. He more than doubled the size of the pond. And out there in the middle, it's about 10 feet deep. In this next shot, we can see where the water runs into the pond from the field up above it. And right now, there's a lot of silt flowing down that hill, and I've got the burn pile up there, and I'm afraid there's going to be a bunch of runoff going into there. So in this area right here on the bottom part of the screen, I'm going to put a swell in and make a silt trap. So what will happen is the water will run down the hill and hit a little flat part with the swell in front of it, and slow down, and as it slows down, it'll drop all the particulate out of the water, and then once it overflows, it'll flow back into the pond. Now the reason why this is important is twofold. First, we don't want the pond silting back up, so the silt trap will catch all that particulate, and the second thing is, if we're going to use this pond as part of our water security plan, we need to make sure it's as clean as possible. Here we are looking back down the bank of the pond. The video is kind of wobbly because the wind was really blowing when I was taking this. There was a real concern that the drone was going to get blown out over the top of the pond, and if I lost signal, it would go down to the pond. So I was extremely careful here. But as you can see, the grass along the edge of the pond has grown up really well. There's some trees I need to take out. Been trying to let the goats and the sheep graze down there, but they seem to lose interest and get outside the fence and go every place else except where I want them to be. So right now they're locked up in the pen until I can get the fence fixed for them. Now we're coming down to the other end of the pond, and there to the right, you'll see the overflow, it's really overgrown right now. And I was out there walking it yesterday and got down at ground level and started looking at it really closely. And it looks like the overflow is about 6 inches higher than where the pond comes in. If I allow the pond to fill up to the point where it's going out the overflow, it's going to be going up against up over the track there on the side of the pond. I can't get my equipment back there to service the bees and take care of fencing and stuff like that. In order to fix that, I'm probably going to have to bring the skid loader down and dig out the overflow, drop it down to where it's just a tiny bit below where the water comes in to the pond on the other end, and dig it out about 10 feet across and over about 10 feet, and then fill the bottom end full of river rock just to make it look pretty. And that way, whenever the water comes in, it'll go out the overflow before it floods that track. So let's move forward and see what changes took place on the back of the dam. Now if you look down to the bottom of the hill, you see a couple piles of brush, and you see that the tree's been pushed back quite a bit. That creates a new edge, and in permaculture we want to try to utilize our edges as much as possible because that's where abundance happens. So I'm going to try to go in there sometime in the next couple of weeks and start putting a food forest in down there. And a lot of the stuff that goes in there will be sacrificial. It'll go more towards the deer and the coons and everything back there. But that's okay because we sacrifice that stuff to them, and hopefully that keeps them from coming up onto the property and getting in the garden or getting into the fruit trees and such. So hopefully that works. You can also see that there's a lot of bare dirt and grass growing there and weeds. We had overseeded everything with red and white clover and promptly had torrential rains, and it washed most of the seeds in this part of the dam down to the bottom of the hill. On the other parts, you'll see as we go forward, the got some good cover on the other end of the dam, but there's still a lot of weeds and everything growing up. Now, when he was digging out the pond, he took out quite a bit of material. And as a result, you can see looking down the top of the dam, it is much wider than it was before. It was probably only about 6-8 feet wide. Now it's probably 20. And that hill is, or the dam is much larger. It's going to give us a lot of room there to plant stuff if we want to. I think I'm just going to, for the time being, turn it into a food plot for wildlife. Maybe put some bushes and stuff up on it later on. But right now, we've got other priorities. Looking back across the pond, you can see where he'd taken out trees to expand it. He actually took out quite a bit. That copse of cedars there on the right was probably twice as big as it is now. And I'll show you the pile that created in just a minute. Now looking back this way too, you can also see another angle of how much he took out when he expanded the pond. You see right there where the new grass starts and the bare dirt is. So you can see he did take out quite a bit. Now another thing you can see from this angle is there's still a lot of algae on top of the pond. The water volume is probably about 7 or 8 times more than it was. But that pond had sat unattended for a couple of decades, and the water was literally toxic. Freya got in there and got really, really sick drinking the water. And so we have been treating it. It's not something we are too fond of doing, but we're using chemicals to get rid of the algae and try to aerate it. And believe it or not, there's actually fish living in there right now. The very first time we treated it, the shock to the water was so much that the fish ended up floating to the top. They weren't dead, but they were stunned. And hopefully we can stock it and get some of them up there. There were perch and even saw some smallmouth bass in there. So we're thinking maybe some grass carp to help keep the algae and stuff in check, and maybe some channel cat and some more bass of some sort. I like bass fishing, so that pond's big enough we could probably get some decent sized bass in there if we take care of it. If you look at the top of the screen, you can see the inlet that we looked at earlier, and you can see the burn pile just beyond it. I admit, in retrospect, that was not the best place to put the burn pile. The pond wasn't nearly as big as it was, so it was further away from the pond, and we were in a hurry, and I quite honestly, I just wasn't thinking. But we'll put swells on contour in that field, and we'll slow the water down before it even gets to the silt trap, and that'll help hydrate the land really well, and just help direct the water where we want it to go. And here in a second, I'm going to pan to the right, and so you can look at this other field. So the hill where the burn pile is and this hill to the right both flow down into the pond. And there's also water that flows to the right of those trees that are in a row right there. It flows down in the pasture where the goats and sheep are. And I need to figure out how to redirect that water onto the slope in front of us so it flows into the pond. And I think what I'm going to end up having to do is where if you want to slow water down, you cut swells on contour. I'm going to have to cut across the contour and redirect the water that way and get it onto that slope so it feeds down into the pond. Keeping this pond filled is going to be a really big priority of ours. We're in an area that's been prone to droughts the past 5-6 years, and we're coming off the tail end of one right now. All the stock ponds are getting filled up because of the rain we've had the last couple of weeks, and so it's going to become really important to manage the water as it hits the land, and that's where the swells will come in handy. We'll be able to redirect the water into the pond and hopefully keep it full, which will help us get through any drought periods that we have. Worst comes to worst, we can always draw water off the pond to water the plants in the garden and all that stuff. Right now, that's not something we have to do, but it's always good to have the option of doing that. Now we're going to do a little spin, and we're going to look down the dam bank once again. And we see one of those great big huge piles of logs that he pushed back down there from the trees that were taken out. I'm letting them season right now. Eventually I'll cut them up. And looking at it, probably a couple cord of wood in there. They're not the biggest trees, but there's quite a few of them back there. It's kind of deceptive when you're looking at it right now. But there's a lot of good usable firewood in there. And then there's the little copse of trees that he left in there. Hopefully they survive. He dumped a lot of dirt at the base of them, and if you put too much dirt around the base of a tree, you'll end up killing it. But if they survive, they'll be a nice little centerpiece for whatever I put out there, landscaping wise. And then we'll go up and give you a little taller view of the back of the dam and into the woods back there. And then we'll spin back around the other way. Give you another high angle view of the pond. And then we're looking back towards the trees. You can see that we did get pretty good coverage on that clover, even with the rains. There's a couple places on the bank there that there's a little bit of erosion happening, but for the most part the clover's taken root, and it'll expand, and eventually it'll turn into a nice little food plot. We're going to put clover back down on it some more, and we'll put cowpeas on it this fall to help keep the soil in and to help rehab that soil, because it's not the best soil coming out of the bottom of the pond, but eventually it'll be really fertile right there. And then we're going to move forward, and that cut in the trees, he made that so he could get the equipment in and out to the dam, because he couldn't take it around the other end. So, I wasn't really too keen on that, but I understand that he did what he had to do. But with that said, I was walking it the other day, and it's going to make a really nice little camping / park area for whenever the grandkids come over. So I'll get in there, and I'll throw some probably K31 in there and get some good grass going, and I'll develop that into a little campsite. The cedar trees will be screening the house, so you won't be able to see that, and it'll just be a nice little place tucked in behind there, and to pitch a tent and have a picnic or something. And then looking down the lane he created, you can see right there in front of us there's a great big huge pile of brush. So that is all the cedar trees that he took out, and there's not a lot of good firewood in there. There's some, and I'll have to get to it, but most of that pile right there is going to get turned into mulch. We're going to borrow somebody's mulcher, and we're going to turn that pile into mulch that we can use in the garden and in flower beds and just around the property where we need it. And as you can see, it's a pretty decent sized pile. One of the principles of permaculture is to create as little waste as possible, and that's why we're going to get the chipper and turn that into mulch. We'll take that and we'll put it in the garden beds and in the flower beds and around trees, and as that wood decomposes, it'll put nutrients back into the soil that those plants will be able to use, and then they'll be more abundant. The yield will be better, and we'll be living up to the principles that we're trying to live by. We're going to spin back around and start heading back up towards the house, and you got a really good shot of that cedar tree there, but on the left hand side you can see a pretty good view of the hayfield that we were talking about. And at one point that was a hayfield. They let it go, and there's scrub trees all over the place, black locust, which are great nitrogen fixers, by the way. There's also some junk elm and post oak in there too. But you know, we've been thinking about it. We were going to turn it back into a hayfield and use it to feed the goats and the sheep, and maybe raise some cattle on it. You know, get a dairy cow or two, and maybe raise a beef cow every now and then. But you know, we've been giving it thought, and we are leaning more towards turning it into an orchard. We feel that we could probably get better yield off that land having an orchard out there, and then putting food forest underneath it. We would get way more stuff off of it. And then, you know, we've got all kinds of neighbors that hay, and we've been talking to a couple of them, and we can barter anything that we pull off that orchard and food forest for hay for the animals. And then there's doing a flyby of that ugly burn pile. Eventually, whenever it gets damp enough, I'm going to go ahead and light it off and let it burn down. All that black in the burn pile is the wood that's left over from whenever the chicken coop burned down back in May. Be nice to kind of get rid of that, not have that as a reminder. But we got to be very careful burning around here, because it's coming off that drought. There's already been several huge wildfires out here that just destroyed thousands of acres at one time. And then off to the right, you can see there's the metal pile. That's all the metal that we've collected off the property and out of the outbuilding. I've just been stacking it right there. Eventually, we're going to have to go through it and pull anything that's useful out of it, and then scrap the rest. It's not worth it right now, though, because scrap metal prices tanked last week, and just doesn't really make it worth the effort right now. And then that rusted piece of metal right there in front of us is a Faro. It's missing a wheel, but it's a horse-drawn Faro that they left here that eventually is going to get turned into yard art. And then we'll fly up the lint a little bit more. So those the black tarps that are on the ground, those are actually tarps off of that they put over lumber to keep them dry. And we're going to put them down and build a pumpkin patch or a melon patch, like Homestead Heart did on a video about a year ago. We saw it and we thought, oh, that's just a great idea. So there, the pond rehab video's done. Now, I still got time, I still got battery power, and quite frankly, I was having a lot of fun flying the drone. It's been a long time since I did it. So I decided that we were going to take it up as high as we could, and we were going to get a panoramic view of the new Grumpy Acres and surrounding areas. Now, I didn't get it up as high as I could have because the winds were pretty strong, and I was afraid it was going to get blown away, because it was by this time it was gusting pretty good. But we can get up high. You can see the parking area and the house and the outbuilding there. Quite honestly, from this height, it doesn't look like a bad piece of property. It's not till you get down at ground level you can see all the junk that it starts getting to you. But as you can see, we've got decent sized field across the road. That ground slopes up away from the house and turns into some really thick timber up at the top of the hill. And quite often the past couple of weeks, we've seen deer out in that field feeding. The farmer that owns that is getting ready to put soybeans in. So hopefully this fall there'll be even more deer. And then we're going to pan around that property next to us. There's 12 acres right there, and we approached the guy to see if he wanted to sell it, because he really doesn't do anything with it, and he said no. And so we're going to wait him out and see if he wants to sell it again at some point. And then there's the pond. Looking back over. Now on this side of us, that big field right there, that's actually a pasture, and they keep beef cattle in there. And his tractor's been broken down, and I've been trading him me going over and moving moving hay bales with the skid loader for buckets full of cow poop. So we've got a lot of compost in there, and we've used it in the beds, and it's been over there in a great big pile of composting for over a year, so it's really good. Then apparently I really like this shot because we're sticking on it for quite a while. Then we'll turn around some more. If you look down there at the bottom of the frame right there, the blue things and the black and white things, those are piles of barrels that I pulled off the property. Close to 200 of them over there right now, and I've still got more than I need to get. And then we're back looking the original direction. You know, it really is beautiful country around here. We're in Kansas, but the area we are looks more like Missouri than where we came from than it does Kansas. And then we'll come back down. Like I said, the wind was blowing really hard, and I started getting a little worried that the drone was going to get blown away. And we'll go down those trees on the right-hand side right there up close. Those are our pear trees, and those things are 60 feet tall, and they've got pears from the bottom all the way up to the top. We're going to have so many pears, it's not even going to be funny. Then we get back down at a reasonable level, and we're going to spin around and fly up the lane a little bit. There on the left-hand side, those two trees right there, those are the original apple trees that were here, that I showed you in some of the first videos from we moved in. And then there on the right, there at the end of the lane, right next to the gravel, that's the peach tree that was there that we thought was dead. And it is actually coming back, and it has pears on it. Or not pears, peaches. Did I say pear trees? It's a peach tree. Anyway, it's got peaches on it, and we're really excited about that because both of us like peaches. And the fact that we were able to get that thing and keep it alive is great. And then we'll do a little flyover of the garden. As you can see, we've got tomatoes here in the foreground on those cattle panels. And then go by, there's actually quite a bit of room left there for us to plant more stuff. And then we'll fly by the arch where the beans are. And then go over the lettuce, and there's some carrots in there too, but not many of them took. And there's lettuce and cabbage and pepper plants, and then a row of potatoes. And those blue buckets are mineral buckets that they use for cattle that we traded somebody for, traded some barrels for those. So right now they've got strawberries in them, and they're doing really well. We're really excited about that. And then you can see Angela's new green tower and her strawberry mound there in the foreground. Those things, both of those are doing fantastic. She had to put a net over the strawberry mound because the rabbits were getting into it. And those black things along the edge of the greenhouse, those are potato bags. And there are potatoes in those. Well, there's one that's got a tomato, but each one of them is doing really well. They've all got stuff growing in them, and just doing fantastic. And then still had some battery time left, and sat there trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I looked over there, and I saw the chickens underneath that bush out in front of us. And at the old place, I used to buzz them with the drone, and they'd get all excited. So I figured, well, let's see what happens now. It's been a while. But apparently, I did it to them one too many times because, quite frankly, they did not care. They sat there and looked at it and just continued about their business. So that's kind of a disappointment. I guess raising jaded chickens is probably par for the course for Grumpy Acres. But you know what? Jaded chickens make great eggs. So we're trying to sneak up on them. And as you can see, they don't care. And then right about here, the battery started beeping. And when that happens, the The drone will go to a safe height, and then you can land it and get your film off of it, or get your video off of it. Listen, I really enjoyed making this video for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll do some more as time goes on. If you liked the video, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. If you'd like to know when we make more videos, go ahead and hit the notification bell. And most of all, you know what? Take what I showed you and try to incorporate it into your property, and you know, try to get abundance for yourself. You know, because once we get abundance, that helps us pursue a life done free. So until next time, I want you guys to go out there and do that. Go pursue a life done free. This is Grumpy G, clear.